Okay, welcome to BigBandTheory.net. These are some rock and roll trivia questions. So, a question, I keep talking about Yes 90125, how it was named, the members in the band. This is when Trevor Rabin was the lead guitarist, an amazing production, songwriting. That's the one Owner of Lonely Heart is on, but the album is amazing through and through. And their album to follow that was Big Generator, just as good. Two fantastic albums later in Yes's career. The question is, the album 90125 and Big Generator were released as a Yes album, but when they were recording this, because they did not have Steve Howe, they had a different guitarist, as I mentioned, they were actually going to record under and release the albums under this band name. What was that band name? Pause. Okay, the band name was Cinema. They were all set, ready to go. They got the whole collection of work done for the first album, and they thought, why are we going to list it on Cinema? This is practically Yes. It sounds like Yes. We'll get more traction coming out as a Yes album. They did. We loved it, and we love Big Generator. So check those two albums out if you ever have time. Two fantastic albums, from production to musicianship, songwriting, the whole works. Okay, trivia question. This is BigBandTheory.net. There's a band that I saw at the Star is Born concert. Now, it turns out the Star is Born movie that you probably are familiar with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga, that's actually the third rendition of that movie. So back in 1977, they were doing the second rendition. So it was already a redo. And Barbra Streisand played the female role and Kris Kristofferson the male role. But back then, when they wanted to have an audience, they couldn't generate it with a digital. So they had a gigantic concert in Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I'm from, at the ASU Stadium. So there's about 60,000 people at this all-day concert. Of course, we weren't there to see Barbra Streisand or Kris Kristofferson, but that's how they got us there, for a little bit of filming so we could be the crowd. Anyway, in this all-day event, there was Peter Frampton Comes Alive, Santana, on and on. Well, a band I'd never heard of, Montrose, was there. In my mind, Montrose stole the show. I'd never heard a three-piece band have so much great music, and at that point they had a unknown lead singer, and I want to ask you, who do you think was the first lead singer of the Montrose band, Ronnie Montrose's band? Pause. Okay, so although I was totally impressed with the musicianship and the guitar work, the singer wasn't bad either. It turned out to be no other than Sammy Hagar, who later, of course, had his own amazing solo career, did some stuff with the supergroup Chickenfoot with Joe Satriani, Michael Anthony, and Chad Smith, but also we mostly know him from his time with Van Halen after David Lee Roth left. Okay, next question is, there are two albino brother musicians, and they each had their own music careers. One was into the blues rock, one was more into rock and roll, classic rock, I'd say. Can you name one or two of these brothers? Pause. Okay, the brothers' names are Edgar Winters and Johnny Winters. Johnny Winters went on to be a really fantastic blues musician and has lots of great albums. Edgar Winters, one of my favorites, he is amazing, and if you ever check him out, amazing keyboard player, amazing synth player when synth wasn't even a thing, saxophone player, drum player. It's just a great album, especially his first album, if you want to check that out. Okay, trivia question. This is BigBandTheory.net, the rock and roll trivia. Wanted to ask you a question, and this is one of my top 10 favorite songs of all time. It happens to be an instrumental. So the song is Frankenstein. That's the name of the song. If I was to guess the release date, about 1971, blew my mind. It's hard to go back in a time machine and understand what kind of crazy stuff I was hearing at the time, like nothing else I'd heard. So what were the instruments that Edgar Winter played on the song Frankenstein? Pause. Well, if you go to YouTube video and you put Frankenstein, Edgar Winter, you're going to see this live video that was done back then. It's amazing. So he's playing a monophonic synthesizer that back then you had to program every sound. There's no MIDI, no touch sensitive. You have to dial in the sound. There's like 6 or 7 different riffs in that song. It's amazing. Then he goes over and grabs a saxophone, and you're thinking, anybody play a keyboard like that, he's barely going to play the saxophone. He kills it. So then, what does he do next? Walks over to the drums and plays a drum solo with the drummer, ends up going back to the keyboard synthesizer, which again is connected to the real box. He goes back as an experimental music and starts dialing with sounds and hitting the keyboard. It's really an extravaganza, and back there, it's hard to imagine anybody had that kind of control over a synthesizer, because it was not punch a button and a sound comes out. Okay, trivia question. You guys probably know the answer. This is Big Band Theory rock trivia, by the way, by bigbandtheory.net. Well, who wrote Dust in the Wind? That's the first question. Which band recorded it? The second question. Third is, how did this person write this song? Very unusual for the songs they did. And really, what was the thing that brought this song into fruition? Who was the person instrumental in encouraging this song to be a thing? Okay? Pause. Okay, the first answer is Kerry Livgren, famous genius behind the band Kansas. So they're a rock and roll band. They have got, actually I'll call it progressive rock, amazing riffs, amazing vocals, harmonies, violin, that's what they're known for. Well, Kerry Livgren is sitting around one day and he's playing on an acoustic guitar finger picking, which he was practicing because he didn't do a whole lot of finger picking for the music he did. And he just kept playing this thing over and over, which was a finger exercise. And his wife kept coming up and saying, I like that song. And he kept saying, this isn't a song, it's a finger exercise. Well, she kept harping on him that it's a song. And then he thought, well, maybe it is a song. So he developed a little farther, walked into the band when they were in a recording session and laid it out in front of them. They loved the song so much, he didn't have to do a lot of talking them in. And it really is the only Kansas song where you hear acoustic guitar and violin, and there's not any guitar leads, not any bass line, not any drumming. It's what I guess would be sort of the Eleanor Rigby of the Beatles, was Dust in the Wind. And it really became one of the most iconic songs of the 20th century. Okay, trivia question. bigbandtheory.com.net, don't go to .com. Elton John songs. So this is what came first, chicken or the egg? So what came first in Elton John songs, lyrics or music? Pause. Okay, the answer was lyrics. And most people know this now, but for 40 years, people didn't realize that Elton John was not writing the lyrics. Bernie Taupin was writing the lyrics, and he handed the lyrics off to Elton John with no idea of melody or music, which to me is crazy. How did Elton John come up with those great melodies and music to those lyrics? And he did, and that's how the songs were done. Now, I think I gave you the question and the answer all at once, so I'm sorry about that. Okay, trivia. Question, bigbandtheory.net. Okay, so we all know about studio guitarists and what they're for, especially the lead guitarists. There's lots of bands and musicians that just don't have the quality of musicianship that a studio guitarist has. And in the 70s, there was one go-to guy above every other lead guitarist in the industry. Who was that? In the 80s, there was one go-to guy for lead guitar. In the 80s, that was the go-to guy, and everybody went to. Who are those two musicians? 70s, blank, 80s, blank. Pause. Okay, in the 70s, it was Larry Carlton. This guy could play and did play on so many albums. Christopher Cross, it goes on and on, album after album, Steely Dan stuff. He was all over the place. You don't even know a lot of this stuff he played. That's what a studio guitarist does. In the 80s, then, somehow, from the band Toto, Stephen Lukather is just amazing. He plays in Wilson Phillips stuff. Again, all sorts of guitar work throughout. Even played on Michael Jackson stuff. And so it's Larry Carlton for the 70s, Steve Lukather from the band Toto in the 80s. Okay.